Last weekend was the 9th of August, 2015, exactly 50 years after we became independent as a nation, as a people. The government pulled all stops to make this a celebration island-wide with the SG50 fund, goodie bags and National Day parade that was spellbinding. The celebration went beyond the glitz and fireworks. I would say that even the cynical amongst us felt the emotions in the heart and the conviction in the gut. As we recover from the high that was NDP, perhaps it's time to step back and reflect on what SG50 really means to us. Indeed, a lot has happened this year. We lost our founding Prime Minister. We had an unprecedented medal haul at the SEA Games that we hosted with panache. There was, or shall I say, there is, the Aljunied Hougang Punggol East Town Council saga, not to mention Amos Yee and Roy Ngung. And now we are all gearing up for the general election, which is expected to be held in September. Clearly, this is going to be a critical general election, if not a watershed. There are a total of 10 political parties that have declared interest in contesting. So, what would be the election issues that will be debated in the coming weeks? Are they likely to go beyond the usual big issues surrounding land transport, income disparity, housing, CPF, education, or are we going to see it as a values-based debate where questions pertaining to integrity, democracy, transparency, duty, justice, fairness, accountability will take more of a center stage? Now, what sort of a society are we or wish to be after 50 years of independence? Would these be questions that will be coming up during the hustings? What we stand for and what we feel we should stand for. How do we balance between economic survival issues and fairness, equality, equity? Are we unwittingly promoting elitism? This is still being debated after the principal of Raffles Institution cautioned about it in a speech. Does the end justify the means? Clearly, these are questions that have become more and more important to Singaporeans over the years as we have moved up the hierarchy of needs. And clearly, they are at the core of SG50, Singapore after 50 years. The question is, how important are these values-based considerations compared to bread and butter issues for Singaporeans? To what extent will they count when casting the votes in the general election? Welcome to Debate IQ. I am Vishwa Sadashivan. Today's topic is SG50. What does it mean for the GE? For this debate, the panelists are Professor Kishore Mahbubani, a dear friend who also happens to be the Dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at NUS. A seasoned diplomat for over 30 years. Today, I hope he won't be too diplomatic in his responses. He served twice as ambassador to the United Nations. Kishore is also author of several books. Good to have you here, my friend. Tay Keng Soon, the man with the distinguished-looking silver hair. Keng Soon's day job is architecture, but what he does most of the time is to cause trouble. He's also an adjunct professor at the NUS School of Architecture. More importantly, he's a well-known provocateur when it comes to Singapore's policies, planning, future, and our surroundings. We look forward to your sharp, insightful, and out-of-box views. Keng Soon, thank you. Our third panelist is our beloved Dr. Kirpal Singh, poet, critic, educator. Kirpal is Professor of English Literature with the Singapore Management University, SMU, where he's also director of the Wee Kim Wee Centre. I've always known Kirpal to be a heart and soul man. We certainly can do with more of that these days. Yes, Kirpal?
Thank you.
Thank you. Last but most certainly not least, the rose among the thorns. Not only because she's not a man, but more so because she is young. Melissa Kwee. She is CEO of the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, or NVPC. Melissa has always been very active in the NGO sector and with community work. She's founded and served as chairman of the Halogen Foundation to inspire our youth to become leaders of substance and values. She was awarded the Singapore Youth Award in 2007 and the ASEAN Youth Award in 2008. Delightful to have you here, Melissa. Thank you. Okay, our first question. is for Kishore. Your latest book is titled, Can Singapore Survive? So my question to you, question mark. So do you feel Singapore's chances of surviving as a polity, as a nation, as a people are better if the PAP gets a clean sweep in this GE? Or do you think we'll be better off as a nation, as a society, if the PAP actually loses more seats than it did the last time, so that there are better checks and balances? You're the thinker amongst us. Tell us, what do you think?
You got to read my book.
That's the diplomat coming out. No? See, diplomats come out with this line so they can think.
Well, you know, my contribution to SG50 actually was to write an article for Huffington Post in which I said that not since human history began, a few thousand years ago, has any society been as successful as Singapore has been in lifting up the standards of its people as quickly and comprehensively as we have done so. So my argument was that in the first 50 years, we've been an exceptional nation. Exceptional cannot last. So in the next 50 years, we're going to become a normal nation. And guess what? In a normal nation, you have ups and downs. So if in the next elections, you have a result where the government wins the majority of the seats, and you have a stable government, then we should declare a victory. Because that, frankly, is what all normal countries have. But if you're trying to go back to the good old days where you have complete domination, a clean slate, that won't come anymore. Because the polity has changed. You have to deal with a new political reality and frankly, welcome it and don't say it's a defeat.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Welcome it. You know, as part and parcel of life, you know, you've got a vast majority, you may lose some seats along the, so make that normal, more normal. King Soon, I see you nodding.
I think that we can't just simply look at the Singapore's situation as though it's in a bell jar. Okay, I think Singapore's ups and downs and its success and everything depended a lot on the external conditions. Okay, the Cold War produced the kind of contestation in the politics, and that produced the kind of leadership that the PAP,
the fire and brimstone.
First generation of PAP leaders, they were honed in that crucible of fire. Yeah. And therefore the whole idea of having economic development, but at the same time providing social protection, public housing, schools, everything. So that created the conditions. And I think for that, we actually have to thank that first generation of opposition people who actually prodded the Lee Kuan Yew generation into thinking through the economic condition, the economic plan, as well as a social plan. So and of course, in that situation also, there was a vacuum of investment, and Southeast Asia was really in the doldrums, and Singapore just simply stood out. And I think you're right that we were we were in a very fortunate position in that sense, that we provided the kind of stability where the foreign investment could come in and be sure that it wasn't going to get lost, right? And so we succeeded. But I think the situation in the world now is problematic.
It's problematic, but at the same time, there was also a certain instinct that our leaders had, you know, that we're talking about the earlier years. We had a certain instinct to grab the opportunities and go all out, and you know, so the opportunities can always be there. It's whether the leaders of different countries actually seize the opportunity, seize the moment, you know. Kirpan, what do you think of that?
You know, Vishwa, if you allow me, I want to begin my contribution here with a slight circular positioning. I've just been invited to contribute to an anthology of poems called The Luxury We Can Afford. This is taking off from what Mr. Lee Kuan Yew used to say.
Yes.
Poetry, for example, is a luxury we cannot afford. Now, I think this new thinking is very, very important. And after Melissa, actually, I think I'm the youngest on this panel. Well, you are, but you are different, right?
Well, I'm different. Okay.
You're right. Thanks to the old man. Designated.
No, you're much younger.
The wise old man, yeah.
Sorry for making you feel out of place.
I know.
Okay.
I'm not.
Yes.
I think I agree with Kishore. We're going to move to a very different phase. But I think, to me, that's going to be a very important and significant phase, because now that, in a sense, the basics are more or less in place, we need to attend to those sort of areas which people consider a little bit outside of the basic line. You mentioned something about the ends justifying the means. So the tree is an objection because I want to build a highway, get rid of the tree. The new thinking might be, let's leave the tree there. It's nice to have trees. And let's have a roundabout or another way of directing traffic. Maybe by then the self-driven cars might even elevate themselves, cross over the tree and go down. We are thinking of a new scenario, an important place, and I think the one thing that we haven't mentioned in a big way is, are we now mature? Are we now in a position where we have the capacity, for example, to talk about, the Prime Minister was a little bit taken aback when the young lady asked him the question at the SMU leadership lecture about the LGBT issue. Have we got the capacity as a people to discuss not just that one issue, but issues that relate to it in very significant fundamental ways? Can we talk about, for example, why is it that Singaporeans don't smile enough? Why are we always giving the impression that we are hardworking, as if we have made such a virtue of hardworking and discipline that anything that departs even a little bit from these parameters of standard, high quality, productivity, etc., it seems to be a little bit deviant.
So,
I think we need to
if I may ask you, so what you're saying is that society as a whole, people are beginning to become more comfortable asking these questions.
Right.
I mean, you don't have to belong to the LGBT community to want to ask a question on behalf of the LGBT, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what we are beginning to see. You don't have to be poor to stand up and fight for the poor, right?
Absolutely.
So, but the question is whether, I mean, your point seems to suggest that if the leadership or the people we elect are not able to deal with it as a normal question, as a question that has legitimacy, then there's going to be an issue.
No, I think there is a kind of anxiety, not just on the side of the leadership, if I may say so, but I think there are masses of people out there that are also a bit uncomfortable.
So what's the
with this
implication
issue.
of that for the coming GE?
We need education in a different kind of manner. We need education of our sensibilities in a way that our young, our middle, our old age can all come together in a happy way and say, look, let's talk about this, rather than let's not talk about it. In other words, sweeping under the carpet is a thing that was for the last half century. The new half century might take some of the issues that we dusted under the carpet out a little bit so that we get a new kind of spring cleaning, a new kind of cleansing. And I use that word very, very importantly because I think cleansing is very significant and very fundamental.
And interestingly, one of the things that our site, Inconvenient Question, is planning to do in this coming GE is to come up with a list of inconvenient or awkward issues. Not land transport, but LGBT.
That one also very inconvenient.
Which one? Oh, very, very inconvenient. But not the usual ones. The usual things, land transport and so on. You have a certain way of. But when it comes to issues that make you uncomfortable, we are putting these questions to the various candidates, to the various parties, to see whether they have a stand on it, whether they have a point of view on it. And how are they going to articulate that point of view? I think those things go back to what you say. Are people, our leaders, also able to handle issues and discussion on issues such as this? Melissa?
Yeah. When you say that, I think that's fair and I think that's good. But the one thing that does strike me about the conversation and the reflection is that the conversation ought not be just directed towards questions which I would like answers to, but rather towards reflection as to what it is that I actually think about that as well. And it does strike me that we tend to have kind of peaks and troughs of interest in these kinds of questions around election season. But I would love to see the opportunity to kick off something. I mean, Kirpal talks about a new education, a new civic education, a new citizenship kind of education, and actually that is. That's the kind of personal reflection that I think we can. I hope this election season will now kick off.
Right, and not just during the election season, but that one that continues after that.
Absolutely.
Right, wonderful.
I might just say that our Prime Minister has to be congratulated because if I remember correctly, he did exhort all Singaporeans to chase your dreams, chase that rainbow. Now, I mean, chasing a rainbow means very important things to different people, right? I mean, some of us keep chasing and never end up with anything.
But the question is
But it's still a colourful journey.
But the question is whether that particular rainbow has to be designed by the government. You know,
Right.
I mean, I'm putting it across because that's the general view sometimes that this is a rainbow, this is the set rainbow, you know, and we can all chase different aspects of that rainbow. But are we allowed to chase the
But
rainbow that we create for
But
ourselves?
you know, Wisma, one of the things that I'm very keen to actually reflect on more, but also is how does one handle an end goal? And we assume that just because the end goal, the rainbow, has been set for us, we are going to be all conforming and walking along a certain journey. You know, you can fly to the rainbow, you can drive a car to the rainbow, you can walk to the rainbow, you can walk with your clothes on, you can walk naked. I mean, in other words, the means by which...
But you can only U-turn when they tell you can U-turn, right? On
No,
the
no,
road.
now they said if they tell you, you're only supposed to obey the instructions. They say no U-turn, then you don't U-turn. But if they don't say anything, you can U-turn, right?
No, that's not true. You are obviously a public transport person. Okay. All right. On that note, I'll throw it open, which is a good thing. You are highly inconvenienced. Okay. So we'll throw it open to the floor. And I'd like to bring the discussion back to this question, right? How do you think Singaporeans are going to be voting in this coming election? Do you think we are going to continue to put a lot more emphasis on bread and butter issues, right? On municipal issues? Or do you think more Singaporeans are going to be thinking about issues of fairness, justice, and so on? You know, things that are a bit more amorphous. What's your sense? Anyone wants to go first?
Yeah, I
Yes.
think Singaporeans have evolved from the basics, right? 50 years ago, I think our parents' concerns were a basic livelihood, a roof, things. We have moved away from all those things. And therefore, we can now go into, like what Mr. Kirpal Singh says, we can get to appreciate the art. We can appreciate the museum, right? These things came about because we've already achieved a certain level of standard of living, right? We have good job. We are not bothered or worried about the basic needs. Having said that, then the next GE is definitely towards the refinement that is taking place in society, the appreciation of the other good things in life. And this has become and surfaced as more important issues, and which are being forcefully, if not in a very robust manner, being discussed at all levels. So I think the GE has turned towards other areas, other aspects, which 50 years ago would not have been in our minds.
How would you compare with 2011? I mean, 5 years ago, not 50 years ago, but 5 years ago. Do you think there's going to be a further shift towards issues that are more complex as opposed to municipal or economic kind of issues?
I would certainly think in that direction, yes.
Yeah.
It's becoming more and more complex. The world itself is becoming very complicated, and Singapore would definitely be affected by the changes that's taking place. So, as you can see, the generation gap that we have, us against our children, we already see that happening, all right? And I think what Mr. Kirpal Singh says is absolutely right, that we have to embrace these changes, accept, and see how we can live together with these changes taking place hand in hand.
Right, thanks. Angie?
I think generally the people would like to see a more compassionate society being developed. We are economically strong, but do we have a heart? And in that sense of, do we have a sense of inclusiveness rather than being exclusive, that people have to fit into our mold? Can we accept diversity? Can we be compassionate to the people who are not doing so well compared to the rest? And even our elderly, are they being given the opportunities to age in the way that would be fulfilling? Because there are many people who can't afford to live the life that they've always been living, and perhaps they have to go into a certain home. But today's old folks' homes are built catering to the caregivers, not to the elderly, who would still want to retain a sense of independence and the ability to age in a manner that is with dignity. The other concern I have is regarding mental health. Statistics have shown that the mental health state in Singapore is not great. And more people are suffering from depression, anxieties, and even our young. Some have taken their own lives, and these are not kids who are seen to be unable to cope with the school system. They are top students who feel that they are inadequate.
But how do you think all this is going to impact on the election, on the way people vote? I mean, how are people going to know whether the different parties, the people they're going to vote for, have a certain orientation towards these issues? I mean, how are you going to discern that?
So it's no longer about bread and butter issues only, but rather the person who is coming into politics truly have a heart to consider the needs of the population that is changing.
Right. Okay. So are there any views on how you would like to find out from the people who are standing for election what their views are on some of these deeper issues?
I would like to know what they have been doing as
How-
a track record
How
rather
would you
than
want
just
to-
their views.
How would you want to know that?
Basically, they can share what have they contributed to society that has really improved the community rather than just talking about what they would be likely to do. I mean, politicians have always been famous in promising, but what have they done to show that they have actually had a track record and developed a heart that they really truly care for people?
Okay. Other views? Hey, you all are very civilized, no? You can I know we are 50 years old. We can be more.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
more than 50 years old. Anyway, I think that it is important to find out what our MPs and political leaders think, and there are ways of doing it where they can actually broadcast or actually present their voting patterns, the way they vote on issues, the way they think about different issues, very clearly for voters. They should actually present a kind of record card for us to evaluate and assess before we vote, and I think that is imperative.
How do you think this can be done?
Because I was on the iPad one day a year ago, and I found that the British MPs had this, this kind of platform where all of them are presented their profiles, their voting patterns on issues, the way they think about things, and their own thoughts, their philosophies, and that's really important.
That's a very interesting point, right? I mean, Kishore, you're in public policy. What do you think might be some of the constraints in introducing such means in Singapore? Right now, are there any constraints in getting the candidates to express some of these things or to be questioned?
No, I think I don't see much constraints, because remember, we are living in a much more transparent universe now. You can't hide things in the way that you could in the past. Believe me, if there's an MRT breakdown anywhere, there's a smartphone coming out right away and instantly putting it live, what's happening. So you can't hide things in the way. You mentioned sweeping things under the carpet. You can't sweep things under the carpet. And even look at Malaysia. Look at Prime Minister Najib, right? Everything is coming out day by day. And you've got to learn to live with this transparent universe. And I think if you are a politician today, you better get used to it.
And you better step forward before people drag you out. And I think that's actually something that our politicians, both the PAP as well as opposition parties, are not very comfortable. Unlike in other countries, which have a longer track record of democracy, where people actually are interviewed a lot more, longer interviews, questioned. But today, it's all, that's been our experience. It's very hard to get the candidates to agree to give interviews.
But aren't you glad we don't have a Donald Trump?
No, no, I'm glad we don't have a Donald Trump.
The danger of idolizing the older established democracies is that they actually produce idiots.
Sure,
and the idiots actually do extremely well,
I agree.
So the fact that Donald Trump is leading in the polls, and the fact that a sensible person like Jeb Bush has fallen from the top 5, does suggest that you've got to think very hard about how you ensure that these things don't go off the rails.
No, exactly. And frankly, at this point in time, I'm not I'd be very surprised if, as a political culture, given our political culture, we are at risk of going to the other extreme overnight. It's about calibrating it. We are on the other extreme, where nobody is really talking about themselves. Nobody is being allowed to ask them these contrary questions. So how are you going to find out about these people? There's always a third party telling you about them. You know, I mean, I'm just throwing it out. Melissa, you...
Yeah, no, it just strikes me that actually in the age of social media, that a number of you have also mentioned too, you would expect, though, that engagement would actually occur on those kinds of channels too. You know, that they would post things about themselves, that they would share articles that they found interesting, they might, you know, share a view on something too. And I think that creates a certain level of interaction and accessibility.
Exactly.
You know, which I think should be encouraged actually.
Yeah.
Too.
Because without that, it's very difficult to find out more about who they are. I don't think we want to encourage, as a society, voyeurism or things like that. That's not what we're talking about. But we're talking about, give us an opportunity to find out more about what you are. Sorry, Kim, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, you know, I think, you know, we sit here and we talk about, you know, is, you know, in the upcoming general elections, is it going to be about values? Is it going to be about integrity? If you look at social media and how the politicians have used it, they've used it for social media, right? Their photos of themselves going around the market. I don't see them using it to talk about issues. And I don't know whether it's because Joe Public maybe doesn't want to hear about the issues. You know, so it's all very well and good, you know, us sitting here, I think, saying, oh, you know, do you think they should, you know, disclose more about themselves? But does Joe Public really want to have these sort of debates? The other thing I did want to comment on was, you know, when I look at the ministers and the MPs, you know, the ones that have done very well since the last GE are the ones that have championed causes that are actually very close to their hearts. They have a point of view, you know, and they're not towing some sort of party line. They're not trying to say something politically correct. They have something to say because they've experienced it in their lives, whether it's an injustice or it's a need that they want to correct. So, you know, I bring up someone like Denise Phua, you know, whom I've worked very closely with in the past because we both have, you know, an experience with special needs children. And, you know, when you see what she's done in that landscape, you know, you can tell she's done it from personal experience. She has a point of view. It's not just saying, oh, you know, we have to be a more
commitment to a
society.
cause, a certain commitment over the years.
Yeah, but a point of view, right? Not
Yeah.
just, you know, as I say, you know, saying what's politically correct.
Absolutely.
Can I just add,
please,
one
yes,
line?
yes.
I want to say that I agree with you, and I want to emphasize that some things don't change. And I can assure you that one thing that really works in politics is authenticity. And if you feel that when you listen to the person talk, he's not just reading out a set piece of slogans or a set speech, but actually describing his own authentic self and what he or she really believes in, it connects with the people.
Unless you're a damn good actor. Right. I mean, yeah, I mean, some people
You're
can...
speaking about yourself, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's why I keep saying I like you, you know?
No matter what happened to the issues of looking ahead of the people, wishes and all that, there are still a small percentage of people who need the basic social needs.
Yeah.
So that topic also
I mean, you should know, you're in the union movement.
We know. There are still about 80 to 100,000 people still suffering from the basic needs of. They are still in the Maslow theory, the lowest end. They still can't get the ends meet. They cannot even take the public transport properly. All that. So we still have to address them. We can't just ignore such group and only talk about certain things. So it should be, each individual politician should be also looking at all status of the economy. I think they should not only concentrate on one area.
I think that's a very important reality check, Karthik, on what you brought up, because it's not either or, you know. It cannot be either or. You can't swing to all these dramatic exposés and talking about, because some people are actually very good at that, right? And there might be a certain, you know, skewing effect as a result. But let's not also forget that a vast majority, I would say, of Singaporeans are still in the basic needs quadrant, so to speak, and those things matter. And how would you determine whether political parties, for example, are able to provide for those basic needs? How would you want to discern that?
You see, the statistics are all known to them, right? They actually know what percentage actually need the needs. That's why they are in public assistance scheme. They are in roles that they know that they can get assistance from where. There are many CDAC, SINDAs to help out. So we know who actually need them. But are we doing more for them also? Same time, there may be a very small percentage in society now. They may be small.
Yes, Alyssa.
Yeah. It's interesting that you raise that, and I totally agree. It's a both and type of a situation. But to me, actually, if I'm thinking, what does that mean for how I would like a politician to engage or express him or herself about that, I actually don't want to just hear how they are going to solve all my problems. Actually, I really don't want to hear about it. In fact, I want to know how they're going to involve me, because actually I want to be part of the solution too, because I think a lot of the challenges that Singapore, faces now actually cannot be solved by just the government, clearly,
Sure.
and unless there is an invitational posture and an invitational approach that we all get to do this together. Good times, bad times, we get to do it together. And I think unless there's that kind of an approach, we're still going to be in that same position of I complain, you do. You don't do, I complain louder. And this is a never-ending and very vicious cycle, actually.
And actually that ensures that the population remains immature. And I think the system politically invests in that immaturity. Out of very good intentions, because the system is such that you want to deliver the good things for the population, and this goes right back to the
old social contract.
Yeah, the old social contract, right? But there are attitudinal problems which are swept under the carpet, and they are actually self-denied. Let me give you a simple example. I have a very brilliant student who graduated 2 years ago. She became a volunteer, right? Organizing communities, all right? And she went to the local CCC or whatever, RC. And she wanted to organize a potluck party. Very simple thing, all right? And she said that we want to invite the residents in this neighborhood to bring a pot of food, and we share and have a good time together, and bonding and all that. And the management of the community center says, no way, people will never do that, right? She went ahead and did it, and it was a great success. Because the assumption behind the delivery of goods is that people are incapable of themselves.
Yeah.
You need us.
The system.
So the system is designed to ensure that the leadership, right, remains the provider, and the citizen remains the consumer. That's not a formula, I think, for the maturing of society.
Yeah.
So when I look at SG50, yes, we've achieved all the material things, but have the people got to the stage where they take ownership of their own circumstances?
Yeah.
That, I think, would be the challenge of the next 50 years.
I agree.
It's a wonderful
if we
point.
can move to that, then we will be #1 in the world.
Yeah. And really, I think we're all more or less in sync here. Nothing really grows under the banyan tree, right? You want a lot more of undergrowth. It's untidy, it's sometimes inconvenient, but you do want that, And that means government stepping back a little bit more, which has been talked about for several years now. And I think the government is trying, but I guess old habits take time to change. Kirpan.
Yeah, I want to come back to two very important comments raised by, is it Angie, is that right?
Angie, yeah.
I think the issue of inclusiveness is fundamental. And the thinking still, I think, in Singapore is that generally if I have a marketing problem, like to market myself, by the way, I wanted to say that, the UK, Elizabeth, the UK MPs and all that, the one good thing they do is provide PR agencies with a lot of work. And many of them get a lot of coaches, like the Americans, personal coaches and all that. So very often what you hear, what you see is not what you may actually get, but never mind. So if you come back to the marketing thing, right? people think that the best people to tackle that problem or the issue or the challenge are fellow marketeers or people in the marketing industry. Now that I think is, thinking that goes backwards. The way forward is to get other people who are particularly outside of that domain to come in with new and fresh ideas. Otherwise, the marketing guys are going to quote all the marketing books they knew, the marketing profs and all of that. So you don't move forward. I think this is fundamental, and that's what I mean by inclusiveness, one version of it, that people from outside, maybe even the janitor can contribute to a new way of marketing because he comes into contact with people that you and I don't in a normal day-to-day
So in other words,
basis.
don't go to the usual suspects.
Correct.
I mean, for example, when I go for engagement sessions and so on,
Right.
it's quite surprising because you see the same group of people being circulated, no?
Yeah.
It's almost as if we don't trust widening the network,
Correct.
so to speak. Kishore, you're going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to actually respond to
King
and
Soon.
support King Soon's point about getting the people involved more in solving the problems and all that. But the question actually we need to ask ourselves, part of the problem is that the government plays a very big role.
Yeah.
The other part of the problem is that the population is very passive. And let me give you two examples, okay? One is that, let me give you two examples. Look at the cleaning of Singapore, right? Why? Singapore is not the cleanest city. Singapore is the most cleaned city in the world. You got all these foreign workers coming in to clean the cities. You go to Taipei, it is in some ways cleaner than Singapore. You don't have millions of foreign workers coming to clean the city. And in Taipei, by the way, the best thing they do is that they get the primary school children to wash the toilets.
We
First
tried
step.
we tried it here.
Yeah, that's what I would do. I would actually say, okay, let's take care of it ourselves. Do what Mahatma Gandhi did.
Parents
Let's get-
objected.
That's exactly my point.
Correct,
That's
yeah,
exactly my point.
Yeah.
The people object to doing it themselves.
Yeah, right.
Another example, you want to solve the car problem in Singapore. The one thing that's going to strangle and kill Singapore is cars. Why do you rely on the government to try and strangle you with COEs and ERPs and all that? Why don't you decide as a society and say, hey, do we really need to have a society where every one of us is going to own a car? Or we go towards now with modern technology, get our smartphone, and hopefully eventually get a driverless car come to our house and take us around. We don't have to own cars. We can actually aspire as a people
Uber.
to go towards zero car ownership.
Yeah, but
and so we are ahead of the government.
Kishore, I think that we don't disagree with you.
Yeah.
This is what we've become. The question is, how did we become this? Is it a natural evolution, or is it because of circumstances that has made us what we are? I think. Do you have a point?
Because, sorry.
Yeah, please.
Because that remark was a bit, because she's pretty active and she asked the question. It's like she has the feeling that she does not get an invitation to help. I don't know how she.
I'm just saying.
Yeah. But I think Mr. Tay made quite serious charges in that sense. I'm a guest here. I'm happy to be here. I'm grateful, like Professor mentioned, for the many good years we have. So as a finance guy, I'm a bit particular about numbers. Is it 50 or 40 plus 10? So, I mean, should we be grateful? Is it possible that, the first 40 years, we went on a different trajectory for the next 100? Will we be better off? I might not be answering your question, but...
You're not. In fact, I think we're all looking at you because
No.
Is there a point somewhere here?
Oh, I question the idea that is 50. I would, in my mind, I see it's 40 plus 10. Things could have done differently. I don't have the records, but
But what do you think would be the implication of all this on the coming GE?
Because people will look at leadership, etc., and they look at what happened the last 10 years.
Can I
Instead of
address
last 50 years, okay.
Can I just add to your point about 40 plus 10? It's a very interesting number. In 2004, Hsien Loong
2004.
2004.
Yeah.
He mooted the idea of the 5-day week
Yeah.
against his father. His father said that we cannot have the 5-day week because he doesn't trust people, all right? Because if you have a 5-day week, by Wednesday they'll be planning the long weekend and therefore stop working. And therefore the economy will go down and blah, 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 okay? But Hsien Loong instituted in 2005. Now, I have lived in an HDB apartment in Bukit Batok for the last 10 years, and I have observed the effect of it. Very interesting. Children 10 years ago are very timid, you know, when they are walking with their parents or with their grandparents, very quiet, you know. Today you can see the body language is much more active, and they speak from the chest, very loud. They don't speak from here, okay? So there is a difference. Why? Because parents are now spending long weekends with their children. This is fundamental. Now, what's the implication of this? It means that these children now, which I see are about 6, 7, 8 years old, in 10 years' time, they are going to be a big problem. There are going to be hundreds of Amos-Yees. if you do not know how to tap their energy and their idealism, and the only way you can tap the idealism is that you got to really create opportunities.
Yeah, and engage.
For the kids to really engage with the realities of life.
Absolutely.
If you keep on delivering the goodies, you know, every time people grumble, you are heading for disaster. So when I look at the political lineup, the question in my mind is this: the 40-somethings, whether it's in the PAP lineup or in the other side, what is their foundational experience? They have grown up in an affluent environment. Everything was provided by the state. Okay, I want to know, as a young person, how did he deal with his ideals? Did he express his ideals in such a way that he got the negative feedback to such an extent that it shaped his character? If he has done that, I think he will be a good leader. But if he hasn't expressed his ideals, which solicited the kind of contrary reactions which you can expect in a relatively conservative society,
no,
then I think they are just another conformist.
Yeah. So I mean, King Soon has brought up. I'd like to go deeper on this point. As Kishore highlighted earlier on, you know, we are living in an extremely challenging, and that's not going to change. Challenging. It's not going to be linearity anymore. You know, it's going to be an ecosystemic kind of thing. Everybody and everything matters, and everyone is going to speak up. It's going to be contrarian, a lot more contrarian than it's ever been, right? So we need people of mettle, you know, not just PR, people of mettle who have certain convictions, certain beliefs, but at the same time who listen and be prepared to listen and change their mind. Not afraid to change their mind, not afraid to say I was wrong. But all that takes, as you correctly put, character. And I'm sure, and I hope that this election, Singaporeans are going to be a lot more discerning about looking at character of individuals. It's more than just about what they stand for, about policies. It's about character. The question is, how important is character? And character applies even when it comes to economic issues, to municipal issues. It's very easy for someone to say, I feel for the poor, you know, lip service. But how do we establish whether the person has that character, you know? Somebody wants to say something. Yes. Janet.
I was going to say that I came because you gave this topic about SG50. What are we celebrating?
Yeah.
And then, of course, halfway through you said, let's change the topic because it's election. But actually, they are linked, right? So they're linked. And for this election, a key point is, so we have reached 50. We are all proud. We're all celebrating. What's important, right, is now with this leadership, wouldn't it be important in the social world where collaboration, where sharing, where inclusiveness, when you tap individual talent, because in the digital world, everyone is an individual, all with creative talent, that they can show the way, that they now can build how we are going to move forward in the next 50. Because many people, right, when they parted ways on the National Day Parade, they said, bye, we're going to see you, SG100, right? Yeah. So here I was really looking forward, thinking aloud, how we as a group will be thinking of what's the next 50 going to be? Yeah. What are we celebrating? What are we going to look forward to? And why, as a society, we can continue to progress, and in this entire so-called ASEAN or Asia Pacific, where turmoil is everywhere. I work in a bank, so every day there's turmoil, right? Last 3 days, look at China. And this election, it is the leader's duty, perhaps, right?
And the strength of character, right?
Strength of character to show how they're going to lead the way. Oh, all this pioneer generation, in all those days we did this. But now, this moment, looking forward, 10, 20, 30, what are they going to do to mobilize everyone that's out there, so that we can bring forth everyone along? Not just the brains, but also the rest of the youth, the slightly less fortunate, and then have that move up. Because then only we can be a society, and we can aspire to influence the greater good of human beings.
Okay, I think you've raised the important point about whether you're able to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else with a very different circumstance and empathize enough to be able to push that person's future. Shyam, you're a national sprinter, right? Do you still sprint? Okay.
Just for fun.
UK Shyam was a national sprint record holder, right? Now, you've led a different life, and when you were a top sprinter, you went through quite challenging times.
Yeah.
What sort of leadership were you looking for at that point in time?
A few things. I think at that point in time, I was trying to do things that was out of the ordinary.
You in the university?
I was in NUS and I was doing my degree, and I was trying to be a professional, like a full-time athlete. But it seemed like systemically, a lot of things, there were a lot of hindrances. And when I insisted and tried to sort of achieve a middle ground, I got a lot of criticism from the press and from the public. And so after a while, I actually stopped and just focused on my degree. So I think it would have been good if we had leaders that could actually look back and acknowledge that there were certain systemic problems that needed sort of readjustment. But now, nowadays, 10 years down the road, we do look at certain things changing, moving away from that hyper-pragmatism that is typically...
So you see the change? You're seeing the change.
I see a change, but I don't know whether it is purely symbolic and whether it's going to really permeate throughout, in every Singaporean. SG50, I think it should be about... I think we've all been saying it shouldn't be about us asking what the leaders can do for us, but about what we can do for everybody, right?
Yes.
How come we are like this? We are like this because we have been socialized over the past 50 years. There were merits in that sort of nanny state, parental, paternalistic style of governance, but now we need to look at values and be altruistic.
And also a different type of leadership, right?
A different
a collaborative leader.
Yeah,
someone who, as Melissa said, someone who engages people,
I think our merits in the first 50 years were guided by hyper-pragmatism and understanding things from a purely economic point of view. Now we really need to look at ideals and values.
Hazrul. No, sorry, that's Hazrul. You are?
Hui Peng.
Hui Peng, you want to share?
Yeah, I think what you said really spoke volumes. I think there are two things at play, like what Shyam says. I think at this point we're seeing a confluence of various forces. I think it also boils down to how variegated our society is. We have people who are still really, and the reality is bread and butter issues are front and center. And then you have another segment of people who have achieved their basic needs and they want more. And then you also have a segment of the population that is deeply unhappy. So however the votes will go will be very plural. It will be a very diverse vote. You will have some that will vote based on their own circumstances, some who want high ideals, some who are deeply unhappy. So it might be a reactionary vote. So it seems really uncertain. But back to what spoke to me, I think it would be ideal if we can have this very robust, I wouldn't want to use the word democracy, but a robust political scene, because the more robust it is, the more people will get to know what the politicians are like. Like in the case of UK, it's really a case of hard journalism sometimes. I've seen videos where the politicians are completely befuddled, they don't know how to respond. I mean, I don't know whether that's the way we want to go, but you see the person through a process like that.
Yeah.
But on the other end, there's this issue of how mature our citizenry is. If you look at social media, people are not really having a conversation. Instead, what we're seeing is this huge mass of like, I say X, you say Y, and they're just talking past each other. There's a difference between talking and a conversation, and if a conversation doesn't occur, that's why you have just like a volume and mass of voices shouting each other out, and it dichotomizes the debate. And I don't know whether it's due to historically we have
And
tended to dichotomize things like.
But that's the reason why IQ was created.
Yeah. I mean, dichotomy is great.
Because
like,
the point is, I think we are having a conversation. We are listening to each other. We are trying to understand each other.
Yeah.
You know, and that's what we want to encourage. And it's possible, even online. What you're going through here is online.
Right.
This is web, and I think we need to start shaping the way conversations take place on the website, on online space, and that's what we're trying to do. Yes.
So since we're inconvenient questions, I want to go and round back to some of 3 or 4 different questions that I actually have, which points to different systems in our current society. The first question is, what no longer serves us? What is it that no longer serves us that we have to actually chuck away, destroy as a system, and relook and not get afraid to actually get away from that? Because looking at our education system, we've sort of primed it up for the past 30 years, and now we're really, really successful. But me as a young mother of a 5-6-year-old kid, I'm really worried as to whether or not the academic success that we have grown up so well right now is actually going to be useful for her future 50 years down the road, where perhaps intuitiveness, global citizenship, compassion, collective leadership would be something that we're now looking at, which has no, I guess, current space in the system which has that placement, that strength. We look at hard skills as something that's tangible that we all want, but we forgot about the hard skills where then we need to know how to communicate and be humans with each other. So that's one thing. What are the...
Let's take it one step at a time, right? I mean, your point is you need a mix of both in the education system, right? You can't, I mean, they're not mutually exclusive.
Of course,
you do need
course.
a mix.
It's a yes
and now we have veered very much towards that. In fact, it's disturbing, and Kripal, this is a key point that you keep bringing up. You know, the dropping of the schools dropping literature, for example. You know, that was I don't know whether they have changed that trend. I think the current minister is trying to do something about it.
A little bit.
Changing that trend. The other thing that's always disturbed me and is this. Kishore was our first and probably the only president scholar who was allowed to do philosophy.
I don't know. Actually.
I don't think there's anybody else. Because it's again, you see, philosophy
is a bigger luxury than poetry, you know.
I know. You know? But you see, the sad thing is this. Even today, I hear politicians and leaders saying, when someone is doing arts and social sciences, oh, there are too many people doing soft options. It's very pejorative.
Yes.
You know, so it's a certain mindset. What's the panel's view on this?
Can I just make 2 concrete suggestions about our education system? I mean, the great thing about our education system, by the way, it is one of the best in the world. I mean, that's very important to emphasize. I regularly get visitors from all over the world coming to ask me, why is your system so good? But frankly, I would make 2 big criticisms of our education system. Number one, if we are so good, why do we need a $1 billion tuition industry? I think that $1 billion tuition industry is an indictment on our education system.
But that's part of the system.
Yeah. But I know, but the point is, at the end of the day, to be fair, is the parents who send the children to tuition.
You're going to be beaten up by parents after this.
Yeah, sure. I'm a parent too. But by the way, the second point I'm going to make, by the way, is that a large part of our present weaknesses of our education system can be cured if we can get parents to read to children from a very young age. I have 3 children. They're now 29, 27, 25. They've done reasonably well. And the one competitive advantage they had was that their mother read to them from the age of 3. Absolutely. And I can tell you that that one small change, just getting the parents to read to the children and inculcating a habit of reading, makes an enormous difference more than anything else.
But Kishore,
Yeah.
these kinds of things will happen depending on the family culture and so on and so forth. And of course, there are people who do the things that you do. But I think the problem is systemic. Let's look at the problem as a systemic problem. You raised the point about tuition, right? It's a systemic problem. And let's face it, tuition has contributed to the quality of our education system as a whole, even if our Ministry of Education doesn't want to acknowledge it. It is a fact that the kids have become scoring much higher marks because of tuition, all right? Now the problem is this. I wrote a report together with 2 economists and a couple of ex-school principals, right, on a new education system for Singapore, okay? We had a big discussion in IPS, and it was attended by about 50 teachers and school principals. There was absolute concurrence, okay? So there was a huge amount of enthusiasm for those ideas that were put down. So the huge number of meetings, we had meetings, we went to Straits Times to help them, to work with them on certain educational programs. And then suddenly, it just died. Why? Damn interesting. And this leads to a very important question. The ex-school principals went back to see their own colleagues in the Ministry of Education, and they were told in one word, right? You are, what's the word? You are being presumptuous. One word, presumptuous. You're out of the picture, right? In other words, you are trying to do things which rightly we do, not you.
Right.
So this leads to the big question, which I think is very important for us. There is an in-group and an out-group in Singapore. If you are not in the in-group, your voice is immaterial. You must be in the in-group first before you are taken seriously at all. Right?
Just one moment.
So this is a deep cultural issue.
I take your point, but Jeremy, I want to ask you this question. You are currently a teacher with the School of the Arts, right? Which is not part of the in-group within the Ministry of Education, right? In fact, it doesn't even come under the Ministry of Education. It comes under MCCY, right?
It's funded by...
Yeah, has that been your experience, what Keng Soon has just said, has that been your experience as a teacher?
My experience as a teacher, as in in-group and...
Yeah, I mean, in terms of, being able to come up with ideas that are different.
But as long as you are part of the education system, you are in the in-group.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not necessary.
Can
I defend something about literature?
Yeah, let's hear his view first.
Okay, I won't speak for Sota per se, but I'm thinking it has to do with culture, right? And a lot of the things we've been talking about in this evening has been to do with culture, right? From transport, the cars, driving cars, the poetry, and even like inclusiveness. It's really about the culture and the DNA of Singapore society, right? And I've always believed that policy shapes culture, and nowhere more so than in Singapore. Yeah, so hence the systemic problems, hence the perceptions that if you're not in the in-group, you don't deserve a voice, It could be a systemic thing, but I'm thinking it's a cultural thing, right? Yeah. And it's really shaped by the policies that we've enacted over the last 50 years. And I'm wondering, what then would we like to see in the next 50 years in terms of policies that shape new cultures, new beliefs? Yeah. What kind of new policies can we...
It's a great point, right? Policy shapes culture, right? And the culture of Singaporeans that Kishore highlighted earlier on, the softness and, that could also be shaped by policy, a series of policies over 50 years. I mean, we're not here to blame any particular group, but going forward, what do we want to see changed, and what are the types of people we want to see as change agents, right? Kirpal.
Yeah. Can I just jump in here?
Quick one.
I jump in here quickly, and also to involve Melissa. Coming back to education.
You want to bypass Kirpal, is it?
He thinks he's sitting in the middle, he can moderate.
No,
Hello, that's my job.
Let's look at the educational structure, all right?
Yeah.
It's a triangle, okay? The MOE is on top, the parents are here, and the teachers are here. So this is an absolutely stable triangle,
Yeah.
okay? And anything that happens here, it's just marginal. What we need to do is to have the fourth dimension. There must be a fourth point. Then the triangle is flexible.
Yeah.
You can move in this direction, and you can move in this direction, okay? That is why civil society and the educated intelligentsia must be systemically linked to the educational system. Right now, you are an outsider.
Yeah.
You cannot change. That's
Yeah.
the problem.
Yeah, and the question is, Kirpal, do you think our system currently and the kind of leaders we want to see elected should be leaders who are welcoming and embracing of this fourth dimension?
Absolutely.
Civil society.
I mean, I was going to say that, part of the problem, I think, in Singapore is that the in-group feels very insecure. Why are they so insecure?
Money lah.
Money, yeah? Okay, that's one issue, right?
Yeah, that's
but
libelous, huh?
they're fundamentally flawed. And I think an insecure system can give rise to what actually Angie said just now as the other problem, mental issues. I think we are avoiding the very uncomfortable and inconvenient question. I've been teaching in the university for 43 years now, 3 universities. And I see the anxiety levels of my current batch of students reach peaks that I've not experienced before. And they are all heading towards a certain, trajectory which is going to be very, very discomforting for us in the future.
And you have actually seen it.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. In terms of how they respond, their behavior patterns, the rage that they have, and all of that. This is very significant. So why can't the people who are in group say an alternative voice is very welcome? Because it helps us better. I mean, it is a very secure leader that says, you know what? You deserve double my salary because you've got ideas that I didn't even dream about. That is the kind of society and that's the kind of leadership that I'm looking for.
And moving away from siege,
absolutely,
so to speak.
Not a siege mentality.
And goes back to what Kishore said at the very start, right?
Yeah.
That we need to move towards accepting that losing, not having an absolute majority is not...
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. No, not having a total control of parliament. Absolute majority. You need absolute majority.
I beg your pardon. Total control, clean slate. You don't need...
You don't want a weak coalition government.
Right. Yeah, you're right.
Believe me, that's the worst case scenario.
Yeah. Melissa, quick one. We need to try and, because we've got 10 minutes left. We just want to have... Yeah.
I was just going to say, though, that from an education perspective, I think that we can't let the framing of the issue as systemic problems then dampen everybody's sense of, oh, how do I fight the system? Because it's very hard to consider that question, how does an individual fight the system, right? The individual has to take up arms in his own arena, So I totally am with Kishore when he says we've got to be there reading to young children. So on a practical level, there are definitely kids whose parents are both working, whose parents may come from disjointed kind of family structures, who are not going to be having somebody around reading to them, and they show up at primary 1 and they can't write their name, they don't know the alphabet, and they just feel like an idiot. And actually that's something that we can do something about. And I wouldn't blame the system for something like that. That's something that I would say, hey, look, we have great reading programs that people can organize for one another. And that's a way to actually start to, I think, address some of these things on a very doable, can you spend 3 hours, on a weekend or, once a week or once every other week, kind of coming down to read, with somebody. These are very practical things that I think people can do.
So it goes back. I need to bring the discussion back constantly to, so what's the implication for the leaders that we choose? So it goes back to your earlier point. In order for this, you need to shift the culture, and for that, you need leaders who are willing to embrace the culture of collaboration, right? It's a different type of leadership, right? Now, yes, if it's less mathematical.
Okay, sure. Yeah. No, he
40 minus 10.
Okay, never mind. As long as you guys listen to me. Yeah. Mr. Tay's model, there's an MOE there. I think it can be broken down. There's a civil service track, okay? There are MPs and ministers that should be doing their job, okay? They are given political power for people like us. You know, that's what you're talking about, leadership. And I myself, I need to advertise for literature. Okay, I'm from a finance background, and I really believe because in St. Joseph's, I studied Julius Caesar, it helps with the depth of analysis. So when you're writing and looking at finance stuff, come on, I've been fighting this for many years.
So Kirpal, did you pay him?
We got one here.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So
well done, man.
I used to have a boss from RI, okay? I hope he changed his mind now, in that sense. But we struggled so many years for St. Joseph. There are a lot of unhappy boys in SGI, but I'm happy your school stopped denying about the elitist issue, so thank you very much.
I think it's not surprising that the SGI boy is unhappy. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Yes, Simon.
I think there's a big disjoint between our primary school, secondary school education and to university, which needs to be bridged. Because I remember my own personal experience. Suddenly, when you go to university, they keep asking about critical thinking, asking questions. Yeah, when you're in primary school and secondary school, whatever questions they ask you to think tend to follow the logic of 1 + 1 = 2. But once you go to university, that's when suddenly they want you to question authority, question things. So I think personally, primary school, secondary school teachers, they're not, because they are in authority positions, and they might not be very comfortable having their own authority questioned. So how do we get this critical thinking involved in the system from a young age? And it has to carry on up till university. I think that would be a big issue.
I'll just...
so the thing about policy shapes culture, yes.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, don't worry. Actually, right now we're going there. I think one of the big changes in the education system really is the introduction of critical thinking downstream. So we're on our way there. So, yeah.
But critical thinking in an in-the-box systemic manner.
No, actually you
I want to, Vishwa, if I may, can I just depart from your thinking a little bit?
Yeah.
You're right in saying that in our society, policy shapes culture, right? But in many of the societies around the world, societies that have survived for a very long time, it is culture that shapes policy.
Yeah,
are we prepared to embrace that and think about it and talk about it?
But that requires...
even in Singapore, I must emphasize to you that culture shapes policy. You know, why are we having so many problems in MRT? Because we fell in love with the Reagan-Thatcher economics.
Absolutely.
We said the private sector can run trains better. And now we learned that it wasn't policy, it was the culture that shaped the policy that created the problem.
Yeah. But policy perhaps shaped the culture that shaped policy.
I mean, that's the point.
Yeah, please.
That's the point I want to get to. So policy can work both ways, you know. It's not just a one-way street whereby the government decides what the policy is, but the people can also decide or share with them what the policy could possibly be. And that brings a very interesting point whereby, I mean, you notice everything is just looking very inwards into Singapore. I understand it's GE. What will be interesting is how the leaders will want to address foreign policy. What role can Singapore play in, like, what I say, 50 years down or 30 years down, 10 years down the road, you know? Not just what we're doing inside. Yes, we're taking baby steps. We're moving, we're being more inclusive, more collaborative. That's great. But at the same time, I think it's good to see what is Singapore going to do as the red dot in the whole world.
Yeah. Actually, I had a friend who I thought put it very nicely, and she said that, you know, in Singapore we're obsessed with being best in the world, you know. I mean, we want to be #1 this, we want to be biggest first, you know, most traffic that or whatever, you know. But she said, what if looking to the future, Singapore could ask ourselves the question, how can we be best for the world?
Exactly,
you know?
yes. I would like to see the leaders
we
invest
have
something like that.
the quintessential diplomat here, who will now attempt to give a non-diplomatic and honest answer to this question.
Very simple. Read my next book.
I tell you, it's all about money.
Let me tell you seriously.
You're trying to make up for lost time being a civil servant.
You don't make money. You don't make money writing books, by the way. No, but my next book, by the way, quite honestly, is about ASEAN and I. The purpose of the book, and which I hope to title it "The Most Blessed Corner of Earth," is to persuade Singaporeans and the rest of the world that Southeast Asia is the most amazing place in the world. So if we as Singapore succeed in explaining to the rest of the world that if you want a microcosm of a 21st century multi-civilizational world that is coming, and you want to see how a multi-civilizational world works, come to Southeast Asia, because Southeast Asia is by far the most diverse region on our planet, because out of 600 million people, you have over 250 million Muslims, 100 million Christians, 150 million Buddhists, and so on and so on and so forth. So we live in an amazing place, and Singaporeans actually have looked down on Southeast Asia. What I hope to persuade Singaporeans is wake up and see how lucky you are to live in Southeast Asia.
And we've been behaving like a rich kid in a poor neighborhood, right? Senta.
I heard this conversation at the MRT just recently with a couple of Americans, and they were just talking about Singapore. It was interesting to see that they are hired here in a senior position. And they were saying things like, Singaporeans are really good in terms of working hard. They're productive, they're efficient, they're effective. But strategically, they just cannot lead. They don't know how to think. It's interesting. And I was just sitting there, okay, is it going to be recorded by someone who's holding the phone and who's facing it? And it was really interesting to see how foreigners were employed in Singapore, paid a lot more money than what a Singaporean would earn in that position. And to make that kind of comment, saying that Singaporeans don't know how to lead, they don't know how to manage, and they can't think strategically because they think, you tell me what to do, I'll do it. Because that's how we are trained, like what you said in schools. The teachers tell you, you listen. The parents tell you, you listen. You go to work, your boss tell you, you listen, until you get to the position. So likewise, like what you were asking again and again, like what we expect from the leaders in the core values. You were talking about the character. What are their core values? What have they done? Who are they being? And what have they done? And what are they going to do? So the be and the do, to actually for us to know that this is what we're going to have by voting for this person. And it's interesting to see that everyone, I've been talking to a lot of different people who they're going to vote for, and even including taxi drivers and bus drivers and everyone I could talk to. It's interesting to see that everyone is so much thinking about their personal interests. Everyone is still thinking about the personal interest. It is about I can't get my CPF. I want to get my CPF. I can't get this one. And the school system is ridiculous. And I can't wait to get out of this country. Yeah. There are a lot of people like that. So there's a lot of, while the majority are the ones who are voicing through news and social media, but there are a lot of people who are not doing that, are going to be determining choosing the leader in our country.
And not forgetting what Karthik said earlier, a whole lot of people out there couldn't give a damn.
Yes, absolutely.
About many of the things that we are talking about, because bread and butter issues do still matter. And I'm going to put this question, Shah, I'm going to come to you in a while. I'm going to put this question to Suresh. James Suresh, you've been, he's been a cartoonist, he's written some really, Mr. Kyasu and so on. Very keen observer of character, right? What's your sense of it? How do you think Singaporeans will vote? How important do you think bread and butter issues are? And here's my question. Do you think bread and butter issues, dealing with them also requires a heart? You can't deal with bread and butter issues purely by being an economist. You need to empathize enough when you're dealing with bread and butter issues. What's your sense?
I think the general feeling is that the current ruling party is still not in touch with issues. So when I jog along the East Coast, I still see people having tents, living along the beach, and you ask yourself how these people get along. I think it's important to acknowledge that there is a problem. Like Karthik mentioned this. I think we need to be aware of this, and we need leaders to actually address these issues. We're not discussing this enough.
And not dispatch the police.
That's right. So I think I would like to see debates on TV with politicians talking about these issues. I would like to see that. And I'm not
but how do you get around the problem that was highlighted earlier on, that you may have people who know how to game the system? You can have debates. Some people know how to game the system. It still does not guarantee you or assure you that you will understand the real character. Some people are good in putting across a certain front. How do you get around that?
I suppose you could get, people are more expressive online, right? So perhaps more opportunities for people to just express themselves. Like someone said earlier, online people tend to just express their point of view. So we need to do like inconvenient questions on a larger scale.
And perhaps less structured sort of formats, less structured interviews. get them to talk more spontaneously about things, and then you can discern their values, right?
Exactly.
Thanks. Dinesh.
I think that we may be at an inflection point as a society, moving from policy shaping culture. And you had asked a question earlier on, how did we get to that position where our people allowed themselves to be shaped so much through policy? And I think quite simply, 50 years ago, the education levels of our people, economic buying power of the individual, they're so relatively low that when our founding fathers, with their education, thought for us, we, the people, basically bowed down and said, thank you for thinking for us with your educated minds. And we fell into a rut, I believe.
A comfort zone.
A zone where the public sector, the government, took on a leadership role where the people were not really protesting, being led. And so the public sector actually grew, maybe overgrew, but they were filling a vacuum. Now, my point is that my hope is that as we go into SG50 plus, is that we start to take ownership of this third space. We need a mindset shift. When we look at Parliament House, today we, the citizens, tend to think that it is the government's house. And how do we get them to think more like us? Something is wrong with that. Whose house is that? That Parliament House is our house. We, the citizens in a democracy, get the government we deserve. Okay? America has got Trump, I'm praying for them. But likewise, it is not so much for us to be sitting back and lamenting the fact that the current leaders, insecure as they may also be, as Mr. Tay has pointed out, are not really giving us what we want. I want to challenge our Singaporeans to say, look, take ownership of this space. Okay, maybe build what the Drucker Foundation has been pushing for years, the third sector. Let us, as a matter of strategy, we the citizens, decide that this third sector is our space. We're going to be so vocal, constructively, patriotic, national flag first. Partisan matters are secondary. You want to join a party, you want to form a party, you want to be an independent. How you get your message out there is secondary. But decide to take control of what it is we want.
You've got to wrap your point. So your point is take control. Don't wait for someone to give you the permission to do it. Don't wait for Parliament. Take control.
We get the democracy.
Okay. Now, we've got to wrap. Quick comment. Quick question. Melissa, it's 8:30. Do you need to run? Can you tahan 10 minutes? Only if you can. If you can't?
5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay, See, she has only got 5 minutes. You guys are. Okay. Quick comments. Yes.
Okay, I'll try and make this fast. Yeah, this whole thing about control is really interesting. And I think the thing about taking ownership is that then the government feels like it's losing control. And that's very hard to do. See, right now you can see to bring back to the SG50 theme, the whole narrative, they're controlling the narrative. And the narrative has been, tribute to the pioneers. Don't forget where we came from. Our forefathers, blah, 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 worked so hard and all that. And they're setting an agenda. If you look at it, they're setting an agenda for the election to come. And they want to control that agenda. Now, we all know that the rules of engagement have changed. And with social media and all that, it's hard to control. But yet, the government still insists on controlling the agenda. And they try to do this, of course, through the mass media, because they are still trying to script the outcomes. Whether or not it's going to succeed is debatable, because they're just things out of their control as well. But whatever it is, they're still trying to do that. But of course, it is, in a way, speaking to a smaller and smaller audience. So my question, I guess, to the panel is, how do you see rules of engagement changing, and will, say, this control over information and the flow of information change, or is the government sort of talking in an echo chamber to itself?
Okay. Before I go to the panel for the final comments, sorry, Sham has been dying to say something. Make it quick, and Angie, I'll allow you, but make it very quick, because Melissa has to go.
I just want to say, if culture is if you want culture to shape policy, the leaders need to be able to accept failure, accept that they are wrong, right? Number one. So all Singaporeans are defensive. They don't want to, if they make a mistake, they are worried. They're worried of failure. Number two, if new media is the fourth estate as a check and balance, Singaporeans also need to know how to exercise their newfound freedom of speech. So a lot of the discourse online is malicious criticism rather than constructive critique. So that's why sometimes the state is worried, because all of us are just finger pointing, and so new media reinforces the very Singaporean culture of complaining that I think we need to try and change. That's all.
Great point. Yes.
I think the lack of equal engagement is the cause of many of these people slamming in the media, because there's always this talk back down when you are challenging a policy or addressing an issue, which really requires equal level engagement. And we need politicians who are able to say that, you know, I have failed in my life in certain aspects, and I was resilient, I made a bounce back, and now I've succeeded. And these are the kind of role models that we want. It's not always about scholars who have straight A's all the way, and therefore they think for the nation. I'm very concerned why 70-plus-year-old people have to do a job of cleaning with hunchback and a health which is very poor, and they have no other option. We need to be smart, but we need a heart. And that nature of compassion has to come from us. We can't just expect it from the government.
Okay, point taken. Quick comments, 1 minute max from each one of us. Okay, Melissa.
I think the one thing that does strike me, though, is that as we move forward, because this was meant to be really about kind of SG50 and what does that really mean for us? You know, I personally feel that the big shift that we will go through, that hopefully the challenge that we will overcome, you know, as a country and as a people, is really to make the leap from initially being the question, are we a viable nation? You know, then how can we be a productive nation or a workable nation or a city in a sense? Then we became the livable city. But I think looking forward, I think the question we ask ourselves is, how can we be a lovable city? And I think that what SG50, in a sense, kind of provoked us all to reflect on is actually what aspects of Singapore we really love, even though they're really sometimes, you know, like and I think if we can really embrace that sense of loving the imperfect, you know, of loving the things that don't always go right, you know, then I think that will really build the resilience that we need kind of going forward, you know, GE or whatever else, you know, notwithstanding.
All right, thanks.
Yeah. I'll say just get rid of paranoia at all levels, and in the educational field, I think this is very critical. There are a lot of educators who feel that if their students surpass them, they have failed. Somehow that something about their glitter or the gold that they seem to be, you know, charading about has been lost. I would say I am so proud that even in this audience, I've got students who have done so much better than I have. And I'm very proud of that. I think that, to me, is very significant. Get rid of paranoia. Because I criticize you doesn't mean I don't love you.
Yeah.
Because I am at a high position doesn't mean that I cannot entertain views from fellow citizens. I mean, somebody over there raised a point that we invite foreigners. You know, the trick about these foreigners, which I put in my book, 2004, is that they come in, they ask Kerpao, they ask Melissa, they ask Keng Soon, they ask Kishore, all kinds of things, and then they advise our authorities that have been appointed them. It's very, very ironic, and I feel sad. The Beatles have a song, right? Even my guitar gently weeps. You know what I mean? I
You're
think
a poet,
this is very significant. So I would say, let's now try and equate the heart with the head for the long-term survival.
That's what you think increasingly Singaporeans want to see in the leaders.
Character, the capacity to admit that they've been wrong, very interesting. To say that we need to have that conversation. Remember 2 years ago we had that conversation by Heng Swee Keat, who was sharing the thing. I'm interested in where that actually is going to take us in terms of, are we going to have another conversation? Was that conversation just an orchestrated one? What actually goes on? I think we need politicians with a very strong capacity to say, I need help.
Great, thank you. Keng Soon.
there are two cultures that are always in contention. The neoliberal economy, which we are part of, produces selfishness. There's no doubt about it, because attainment, achievement, it gets the rewards, okay? But there's the other part of it, which is about collaboration, cooperation, the kampong spirit, right? The gotong royong.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that part has been submerged to a large extent. It will take the greatest level of creativity, right, in civil society, in government, amongst individuals, to reconstruct the proper connection between personal attainment and community cohesion.
Yeah.
I want to suggest the coffee shop model, okay, where you have chicken rice, roti prata, all the goodies, right, and it's all within one space, right, and there's a coffee shop owner, right, who wants to see that they all succeed. Right, because their success is his success.
Correct.
That is the model.
Right.
So if we can decentralize our economic, cultural, social, spatial relationships, in that way, we will break through.
And right now, the system appears to be all of them want to make this coffee shop owner successful.
Yes.
In order for them to be successful.
That's right.
You know.
So it's a two-way
yeah,
process.
so it's the other way around.
Yeah.
Yes, Kishore.
Well, I must say I agree with the spirit of the comments that have been made so far, and I would say I want to end with the most important four-letter word in the English language, and it's spelled L-O-V-E. And I think that the first 50 years, Singapore was exceptionally successful because we had an exceptionally good head. I think in the next 50 years, we need to balance our head, and as Melissa said, with our heart. And that's the shift that Singapore has got to make, because you need Singaporeans who love Singapore and love their fellow Singaporeans, and especially love the fellow Singaporeans at the very bottom. Because if you don't take care of the fellow Singaporeans at the bottom, very bottom, you don't love Singapore.
Yeah.
So that's why I know I'm not allowed to promote any more books, but tomorrow morning in Straits Times, there's a column by me on the values that Singapore should have in the next 50 years, and among them, one of the most important one is compassion.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Kishore.
Yay.
I would like to sum up by saying that this has been an incredibly interesting, insightful discussion, simply because we all disagreed and agreed. And we were not uncomfortable with that. And the word that comes to mind is being comfortable with ourselves, being comfortable being contradicted. And I don't think Singapore needs to continue to operate in a zero-sum environment, either or. We have been so far really functioning in an either or. It's got to be either economics or values. It's got to be either bread and butter issues or about integrity. It's got to be about the PAP or the opposition. Why can't it be a good blend of all? You know, I remember some time back, the former Prime Minister Goh Chok Tong did say that Singapore does not need to have an opposition as long as the political party in power is doing a good job. But my response would be, and Sham would agree with this, a sprinter, after a certain point, goes beyond just wanting to get a gold. A sprinter wants someone good enough, worthy enough to pace him so that he has a much better chance of breaking his own record.
Correct.
And you can't break your own record by just running on your own. You got to break your own record by nurturing people who are worthy competitors.
Right.
And that's what we need. And I think increasingly that's the kind of leaders who are comfortable under their own skin. And that's what we're talking about. And who have the capacity for empathy, not pity. Right, Karthik? You don't want leaders who feel sorry for people no. You want You want leaders who care for them enough, understand them, and treat them with dignity. Just as in school, we want top scorers to not feel sorry for the guys who are struggling, but find complementary values in each other,
Right.
collaborative.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, I think what Jeremy said is absolutely spot on. Policy shapes culture. But what we also talked after that is culture does shape policy. At the end of the day, leaders shape both. And I hope that this election, we will choose our leaders who are not just managers.
Correct.
Thank you very much. It leaves me now to thank my panelists, Kishore, King Soon, Kirpal, and of course the wonderful Melissa, who has been kind enough to stay on for a little longer than necessary. Okay, please do join us in the debate and share your views. Log on to our website, www.iq.sg. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook for the latest news, and watch our previous videos and debates on YouTube channel. Remember, you ask, they answer, we make it happen. This has been IQ, Inconvenient Questions.